Activity title. You're not like the others. Characters. Still working on those little projects? When are you going to get a real job? Laura must regret marrying you. The words were like poison, slow but deadly. Everything changed at Mr. Augusto's 60th birthday party. A grand event with hundreds of guests, French champagne, live orchestra. Daniel and Laura arrived discreetly, dressed in the best they had, which still seemed modest compared to the luxury flaunted by the other family members. The evening started badly. Rodrigo, Daniel's older brother, was announcing a major deal he had closed. Millions of dollars. General applause. Mr. Augusto stood up and gave an emotional speech about pride, legacy, success. He mentioned each of his children. Each one except Daniel. It was as if he didn't exist. Imagine being in a room full of people, hearing your own father list the family's achievements, and your name never being spoken. As if decades of life could be erased with silence. Laura squeezed Daniel's hand under the table. "Let's leave," she whispered. But Daniel was paralyzed. Something inside him refused to run away again. Then came the moment that would change everything. Carla, the middle sister, known for her sharp tongue and heart of stone, stood up with a glass in her hand. "Dad, since you mentioned the family, I think we should talk about the elephant in the room." She smiled cruelly. "Daniel, have you ever wondered why Laura is always by your side? Even though you're... well, you?" The hall fell silent. All eyes turned to Daniel. "Maybe she's hoping you'll finally give up and ask the family for help. Or maybe..." Carla paused dramatically. "She's already realized her mistake and is planning her exit." Nervous laughter echoed through the hall. Daniel felt his blood boil. But what came next was even worse. Laura let go of his hand. "Carla is right," Laura said, her voice strangely calm. "I've been thinking a lot about my future, and about whether I really chose the right man." Daniel's world collapsed in that instant. He looked at Laura, searching for some sign that this was a cruel joke. But her eyes were cold, distant. "I married you thinking you would change," Laura continued, now standing up. "I thought eventually you would be someone. But years have passed, Daniel. Years. And you're still the same loser." The word loser echoed in Daniel's mind like the tolling of a funeral bell. Rodrigo began to clap slowly, sarcastically. Soon the whole family was applauding. Not for Laura, but for Daniel's humiliation. This was the evening's entertainment. The ritual sacrifice of the failed son. Mr. Augusto, sitting in his chair like a king on his throne, simply smiled. A satisfied smile. As if at last Daniel was being put in his proper place. "I'm going to free myself," Laura announced, theatrically. "I'm going to find a real man. Someone with ambition. With money. With power." She looked around the room, then back at Daniel. Someone who isn't a burden. Daniel felt tears burning his eyes but refused to let them fall. Not there. Not in front of them. He stood up, his legs trembling, and walked toward the exit. Each step seemed to last an eternity. The whispers followed him. The laughter pursued him. "Beggar!" Someone shouted. He didn't know who. "Loser!" Another echo. "We always knew." Daniel left that hall like a man dead inside. In the days that followed, he disappeared. He didn't answer calls. He didn't respond to messages. His close friends, the few he had, became worried. But Daniel needed solitude. He needed to process the betrayal, the humiliation, the searing pain of realizing he had never been loved or valued by anyone in his own family. He spent weeks wandering the city, sleeping in cheap hotels, eating little, thinking much. The word beggar echoed constantly. Not for lacking financial means, but for having desperately sought love, approval, and a sense of belonging throughout his life. But here's the truth. No one tells you about hitting rock bottom. It's the only place where you can finally push back up. When you lose everything, including the illusion that someone will save you, you discover something unexpected. You discover that the only approval that truly matters is your own. Something began to change inside him. It wasn't a single dramatic moment. It was a slow transformation, like a seed that finally cracks and begins to sprout after years dormant in unyielding earth. Daniel realized something fundamental. He had spent his entire life trying to prove his worth to people who would never value him. His family didn't see him as a human being, but as a broken piece in a collection of perfect trophies. But what if he stopped trying to fit in? What if he used this pain, this anger, this rejection as fuel for something greater? Daniel began to work. Not on small projects for modest clients, no. He channeled all his creative energy, all his architectural intelligence, all his repressed hunger for recognition into a single grand project. He created something that would redefine everything. An architectural concept that combined sustainability, technology, and beauty in a way no one had done before. For months, he worked alone, obsessively, developing every detail. He slept little, ate even less, but for the first time in his life, he felt purpose. Consider this. While his family celebrated million-dollar contracts at lavish dinners, Daniel worked in silence, transforming every tear shed into a project detail, every insult received into architectural innovation. The pain that should have destroyed him was becoming the fuel for his reconstruction. And then, an opportunity arose. An international architecture competition, sponsored by a visionary billionaire who sought to design the residential complex of the future. The winners would not only receive a fortune in prizes, but would also have their project funded and built, instantly becoming recognized worldwide. Daniel submitted his project, without telling anyone, without expectations, just putting it out there, into the universe. The result of years of pain transformed into creation. 3 months later, he received an email. His project had been selected. Not just selected, he had won. Among thousands of submissions from renowned architects around the world, Daniel Santos, the family's Beggar, had won first place. The prize? $15 million. But more than the money, what came with the victory was a contract to build 5 residential complexes in different countries, partnerships with the world's largest construction companies, interviews in international magazines, invitations to speak at prestigious universities. Daniel didn't tell his family. He didn't tell anyone from his old circle. He simply accepted the proposals, worked intensely with his new team, and in less than a year, transformed from an unknown architect into one of the hottest names in world architecture. The money started coming in. A lot of money. But Daniel didn't change externally. He didn't buy sports cars, didn't flaunt mansions. He invested quietly in more projects, in technology, in creating a real legacy based on innovation and not on ego. And here's what the Santos family would never understand. True power doesn't shout. It doesn't need an audience. While they measured success by the applause at parties, Daniel was constructing something that would transform the lives of thousands. The difference between empty wealth and wealth with purpose. During this time of transformation, Daniel also found something unexpected. Inner peace. The forced solitude had taught him to value himself. The brutal rejection from his family had freed him from the prison of seeking external approval. He finally felt whole. Until one day, an invitation arrived by mail. An elegant envelope with golden letters. The wedding of Rodrigo, his older brother, with Melissa, an heiress from a family even wealthier than the Santos. The event would be the celebration of the year. All the important names in the city would be present. Daniel looked at the invitation for long minutes. Part of him wanted to throw it in the trash and move on. But another part, a part he didn't know existed, whispered, "Go." Not for revenge, not to prove anything, but simply to close a cycle, to look into the eyes of those people who destroyed him and show, without words, that he had survived, that he had thrived. So Daniel decided. He would go to the wedding, but he wouldn't arrive as the Daniel from before. He would emerge as the man he had become, and this time he would do it entirely on his own terms. He chose his outfit carefully, not to show off, but to show respect for himself. A tailored suit, elegant but not excessive. Italian leather shoes, a discreet but unmistakable watch for those who understand. A vintage Patek Philippe, a rare collector's piece. On the morning of the wedding, Daniel looked at himself in the mirror. The person looking back was different. There was something in his eyes. Confidence, calm, strength. He was no longer a boy desperately seeking approval. He was a man who had carved his own path, triumphant despite all obstacles. The driver waited at the building entrance, a discreet Mercedes. Daniel got in and gave the address of the Santos mansion where the wedding would be held. As the car glided through the city streets, Daniel took a deep breath. He didn't know exactly how the family would react. Did they know about his success? Had they heard about the architect who was revolutionizing the international market? Or did they still see him as the failed beggar who left that party in shame years ago? It didn't matter. Daniel wasn't going there for them. He was going for himself. The car arrived at the mansion entrance. Security guards, valets, photographers. It really was the event of the year. Daniel got out of the car and began walking toward the main entrance. And it was at that exact moment that the first guests saw him. A pause, a silence. Whispers began to spread like wildfire. "Who is that? He looks familiar. Wait, isn't that the—" Daniel kept walking, his bearing confident, his steps firm. He crossed the double glass doors leading to the main hall. And inside, amid hundreds of elegantly dressed guests, his eyes found a familiar figure. Laura, his ex-wife. She was chatting animatedly with a group of women, laughing, gesturing. She seemed happy, or at least performing happiness. Then she felt it, that inexplicable sensation of being watched. Slowly, she turned, her eyes scanning the crowded room until they finally landed on him. And when Laura saw Daniel standing there, her face instantly paled. The champagne glass in her hand began to tremble, because in that moment, something inside her broke. She realized the truth in that moment. The man she had once dismissed as a loser, the man she had publicly humiliated and callously discarded now, stood before her, radiant and transformed, powerful in a way that transcended money and spoke to pure, undeniable presence. And Laura understood with a painful and sudden clarity. She had made the biggest mistake of her life. But what she didn't know, what no one at that party yet knew, was that the person they had called a beggar had become the only thing that family truly worshipped. He had become richer, more influential, and more respected than any of them would ever be. And this was just the beginning. Daniel walked slowly through the hall, politely nodding to some guests who greeted him without recognizing him. He observed everything with surprising calm. The excessive decorations, the ostentatiously dressed guests, the air of superiority that hung over every conversation. It was like watching an aquarium where he had once thrashed desperately for oxygen. Now, standing outside the glass, he saw with crystalline clarity. Those inside were still suffocating, locked in a frantic competition for survival, oblivious to the fact they could simply swim free. Carla was the first family member to recognize him. Her eyes widened when she saw him approaching. For a brief moment, Daniel saw fear there, but quickly she recovered her mask of arrogance. "Daniel," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "My God, is that really you? What a surprise." Heads turned. The Santos family began to notice his presence. Rodrigo approached with Melissa by his side. His older brother looked at Daniel with a mixture of confusion and poorly disguised contempt. "I didn't think you'd come," Rodrigo said, trying to sound casual but failing. Well, you know, after what happened. After you publicly humiliated me," Daniel replied calmly. "Why would I miss the opportunity to celebrate the family's happiness?" The sarcasm was subtle, but perceptible. Some people around exchanged uncomfortable glances. Melissa, the bride, watched Daniel with curiosity. She had never met him before. All she knew was what the Santos family had told her, that he was the failed brother, the dead weight, the beggar. But the man before her didn't seem like any of that. There was something about him that intrigued her. A quiet confidence, a presence that didn't need to shout to be noticed. "Your suit is very elegant," she commented. "Is it from a designer I would know?" "Savile Row," Daniel replied simply. "Custom made in London." Melissa blinked, surprised. Savile Row wasn't for just anyone. It was for people with serious money and refined taste. Rodrigo quickly changed the subject, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, I'm glad you came. Dad will be surprised." "I'm sure he will," Daniel murmured. At that moment, Mr. Augusto appeared, walking toward the small group. He was older, Daniel noticed, more bent. Time was finally taking its toll. When the patriarch's eyes landed on Daniel, there was a second of recognition, and then contempt. "You," was all he said. "Father," Daniel replied, keeping his voice neutral. "I didn't think you'd have the courage to show up here, after running away like a coward from that party." Daniel smiled. Not a smile of humor, but of knowledge. "I didn't run away, Father. I withdrew. There's a difference." "Semantics," Mr. Augusto grumbled. "You were always good with words. Shame you never knew how to do anything with them." People around began to notice the tension. The conversation was getting louder. More guests approached, curious. "Actually," Daniel said calmly, "I learned to do quite a lot with words, and with ideas, and with hard work." Mr. Augusto laughed, a bitter sound. "Hard work? Are you working on another one of those unimportant little projects?" Daniel was about to respond when Laura appeared beside Mr. Augusto. She looked at Daniel with an expression he couldn't decipher. Regret? Fear? Hope? "Daniel," she said softly. "Can we talk? In private?" "There's nothing for us to talk about, Laura," Daniel replied, but without cruelty. Just statement. "You made everything very clear that night." "I was confused," she began, but Daniel gently raised his hand. "You were being honest, perhaps for the first time in our marriage, and I thank you for that. Because your honesty freed me." Can you see the profound irony? The most devastating humiliation of Daniel's life ultimately became his most significant gift. Without that brutal moment of destruction, he would never have discovered the inner strength to completely reinvent himself. Sometimes the very people who seem intent on breaking us are precisely the catalysts we need to set ourselves free. Laura fell silent, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Mr. Augusto, impatient with the emotional moment, interrupted. "Enough of this dramatization. Daniel, did you come here for any specific reason besides wasting our time?" It was the opening Daniel had been waiting for. "Actually, I came for 2 reasons, he said, his voice getting slightly stronger. "First, to congratulate Rodrigo and Melissa. Second," he paused, letting the tension build. What would come next would change everything these people thought they knew about him. "To make an announcement." Rodrigo frowned. "What kind of announcement?" Daniel looked around, noticing that he now had the attention of practically the entire hall. Conversations had stopped. Everyone was watching. As many of you know, Daniel began, addressing not just the family but everyone present. For years, I was seen as the failed member of the Santos family, the beggar, the loser, the one who would never amount to anything. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Some people seemed uncomfortable, others curious. And for a long time, Daniel continued, I believed that. I believed that my worth was determined by my family's approval, by success in business, by how much money I had in the bank. Mr. Augusto was turning red. Daniel, this is neither the time nor the place. But then something changed, Daniel continued, ignoring the interruption. I realized I was measuring my worth by the wrong ruler. That success isn't about how much you impress others. It's about how much you respect yourself. Some guests began to nod, resonating with the words. So I stopped trying to impress my family, Daniel said, looking directly at Mr. Augusto. And I started working on what I truly loved. Architecture, design, creation. But when you win a $15 million international award for a groundbreaking architectural project, the bills pay themselves. The silence that followed was absolute. Rodrigo blinked. What? And when that project leads you to multi-million-dollar contracts in 5 different countries, Daniel continued, his voice steady, you realize that maybe your worth was never the problem. Maybe it was the people around you who couldn't see it. Mr. Augusto was white. You're lying! Daniel took his phone out of his pocket, opened an article from an international architecture magazine. He handed the phone to his father. There it was. Daniel Santos, the visionary architect who is redefining sustainable housing. Photos of him at conferences, interviews, impressive projects. Mr. Augusto's hand trembled as he held the phone. Is this real? Absolutely real, Daniel confirmed. I'm the architect you read about in the newspapers, the one who won that award everyone talked about. The one who's building the revolutionary residential complex in Singapore. The hall erupted in murmurs. People grabbed their own phones, searching for confirmation. And they found it. Article after article. Photo after photo. Daniel Santos wasn't just successful. He was exceptional. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The invisible social hierarchy of the room completely inverted. The beggar who had entered unnoticed was now the center of attention. Everyone sought his acknowledgement. Everyone wanted to be near him. The same family that had previously despised him now watched with a mixture of shock and sudden admiration. Laura covered her mouth with her hands, tears flowing freely now. The realization of what she had lost was finally sinking in. Carla was pale, speechless for the first time in her life. Rodrigo looked between the phone and Daniel, trying to process the information. But why didn't you tell us? Mr. Augusto finally asked, his voice strangely weak. Daniel looked at his father with a mixture of pity and peace. Because I didn't need your approval anymore, Dad. All my life I begged for a compliment from you, for a sign that you saw me. But when I finally achieved real success, I realized I didn't care anymore whether you knew or not. He paused, letting the words sink in. You called me a beggar, said I would never amount to anything, laughed at me, humiliated me. Daniel looked around the room, making eye contact with each family member. And you know what I learned? I learned that people who need to put others down to feel big are the smallest people of all. Mr. Augusto took a step back, as if he had been punched. But I didn't come here to humiliate you, Daniel continued, his voice softening. I didn't come for revenge. I came because I realized I was holding on to resentment. And resentment is like poison. It kills you from the inside. He looked at Rodrigo and Melissa. So, sincerely, congratulations on the wedding. I hope you'll be very happy together. Rodrigo opened his mouth but couldn't speak. Daniel turned to Laura. And you, Laura, thank you for being honest with me that night, for setting me free to find who I really was. Without that pain, I would never have discovered my strength. Laura was sobbing openly now. Daniel, I'm so sorry. So sorry. I know, Daniel said gently, and I forgive you. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. He finally looked at Mr. Augusto. And Dad, I forgive you too. For all the years of contempt, for never seeing me, for treating me as if I was worthless. The old man was trembling now, unexpected tears welling in his eyes. Because the truth, Daniel concluded, is that your judgment of me was never about me. It was always about you, about your own insecurities, about your fear that success isn't merely defined by financial wealth and social status, but by finding genuine purpose and personal meaning. The silence in the hall was deafening. Daniel took a deep breath. So once again, congratulations to the bride and groom. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your life. I'm going to enjoy mine. He began to turn to leave when Mr. Augusto spoke, his voice breaking. Daniel. Wait. Daniel stopped, but didn't turn completely. I was wrong, the patriarch said, the words clearly costing him dearly. About you. About everything. Daniel turned slowly, looking at his father. "I know," he said simply, "but knowing that doesn't change the past. It can only change the future, if you choose to let it." Mr. Augusto took a step forward, hesitantly. Is there any chance of what?" Daniel asked, not with cruelty but with honesty. "Of us becoming a happy family again? Of pretending the last few years didn't happen?" "No," the old man said, shaking his head. "That would be impossible. But perhaps we could start over, slowly, if you're willing." Daniel looked at his father for a long moment. He saw an old man, broken by the realization of his own mistakes. A man who finally understood the cost of his cruelty. "Maybe," Daniel said finally. "But not today. Today is Rodrigo's day. Let's leave it at that." He gestured to all those present. "Enjoy the party. Enjoy life. And remember, a person's worth is never determined by others' opinions. It's determined by who they choose to be when no one is watching." And with that, Daniel Santos, the man who had been called a beggar and a loser, walked toward the exit. Not running, not hiding, but walking with his head held high, with the dignity of someone who finally knows their own worth. The guests stepped aside, creating a corridor for him. Some applauded. Others simply watched in respectful silence. When Daniel reached the door, he looked back one last time. He saw Laura crying. He saw Mr. Augusto leaning on a chair, looking like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. He saw Rodrigo and Carla processing the realization that the brother they had mocked was now more successful than they would ever be. And Daniel felt peace, not malicious satisfaction, not cruel triumph, just peace. Because revenge was never the goal. His freedom was. He stepped out into the fresh afternoon air, got into his car, and drove away. In the days that followed, the story spread. The Santos family, so well known for their success and arrogance, had been confronted by the person they despised most. And that person had proven to be extraordinary. Some guests spoke with admiration about Daniel's class. Others commented on the poetic irony of it all. But everyone agreed on one thing. They would never forget his speech. Mr. Augusto tried to contact Daniel several times in the following weeks. Emails, messages, even a handwritten letter. Daniel read each message carefully, but he didn't respond. Not yet. The wound was too deep. Healing would take time. Laura also tried to reconnect. Elaborate apologies, explanations about family pressure, promises that she had always truly loved him. Daniel responded only once. "Laura, I hope you find the happiness you're looking for, but that happiness cannot be found in me. Take care of yourself." Rodrigo never reached out. His pride wouldn't allow it, but Daniel occasionally saw photos of him at social events, and always noticed that his brother's smile seemed a little less bright, a little less confident. Carla, surprisingly, was the only one who approached genuinely. Months after the wedding, she showed up at Daniel's office unannounced. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said when she finally managed to see him. "But I need you to know that I've spent months thinking about what you said, about people who need to diminish others." Daniel just listened. "You were right," she continued, tears in her eyes. "I was always cruel to you because seeing you follow your dreams, even without the family's support, made me question why I never had the courage to do the same." It was the most genuine conversation Daniel had ever had with his sister, and while it couldn't erase years of cruelty, it was a start. As for Daniel, he continued his journey. More projects, more successes, but also, and more importantly, more purpose. He started a foundation for young architects from low-income families. He offered free mentorship. He funded innovative projects. He created opportunities he wished he'd had when he was younger. And here's the lesson Daniel learned, the one we all need to understand. Real success isn't about proving something to those who rejected you. It's about becoming someone you respect when you look in the mirror. When you stop seeking external validation, something magical happens. You finally become free. Because ultimately, Daniel discovered a profound truth. The true measure of success isn't what you accumulate, but what you contribute. It's not about how high you climb, but how many you help reach greater heights. 1 year after that wedding, Daniel was invited to give a lecture at a prestigious university. Hundreds of students packed the auditorium, eager to hear the visionary architect who had revolutionized the field. At the end of the lecture, a student raised their hand. "Mr. Santos, your story is inspiring. But how did you deal with all those years of rejection? How did you not let it destroy you?" Daniel thought carefully before answering. "Rejection only destroys you if you accept it," he finally said. "For years, I believed my family's judgment defined my worth, that I wasn't good enough. But I realized their opinion revealed more about their limitations than about my potential." He paused, looking at the young, hopeful faces before him. "All of you will face rejection in your lives. People will doubt you. They'll say your dreams are impossible. They'll try to convince you to give up and be realistic." Nods rippled through the auditorium. "When that happens," Daniel continued, "remember this. Someone's opinion of you is not a fact. It's just their perspective, filtered through their own experiences, fears, and limitations. He smiled, a smile that radiated authenticity and peace. Your worth is not determined by who believes in you. It's determined by who you choose to be when everyone stops believing. Because it's there, in the darkness, when you're completely alone, that you discover who you really are. The auditorium erupted in applause. Daniel looked at those young people and saw versions of himself. All with dreams, all with fears, all wondering if they were good enough. And he wished he could tell each one of them, you are. You always have been. You just need to believe it long enough to prove it to the world. That night, driving back home, Daniel thought about the journey he had made. From the rejected son to the acclaimed architect. From the ridiculed beggar to the man who now inspired thousands. And he realized he wouldn't change a thing. Not even the pain, not the humiliation, not the years of struggle. Because all those experiences, however painful they were, had sculpted him into the man he was today. A man who understood compassion through suffering cruelty. A man who valued kindness after experiencing malice. A man who truly understood success only after tasting the bitter depths of failure. Think about every wound you carry, every rejection that marked your life, every person who said you weren't enough. Those scars are not your weakness. They are the map of your transformation. They are proof that you survived what should have destroyed you. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was the greatest lesson of all. That sometimes the people who hurt you are the most important teachers. Not because pain is good, but because it forces you to decide who you want to be in response to it. You can let the pain embitter you, or you can let it strengthen you. You can use rejection as an excuse, or you can use it as fuel. You can believe in the cruel words of others, or you can define your own worth. Daniel chose the second path, and that made all the difference. So, here's the question I leave with you. When someone calls you a beggar, when someone laughs at your dreams, when someone tells you you'll never be anything, what do you choose? Will you choose to believe their limiting words? Or will you choose to prove that you are far more extraordinary than anyone could ever imagine? The choice is always yours. And if you're going through this now, if someone is making you feel small, inadequate, worthless, let me tell you something that took Daniel years to learn. They're wrong about you. Completely wrong. You're not what they say. You are what you choose to become. And that choice, that decision to rise up despite everything, to continue despite doubt, to believe in yourself when no one else does, that's true courage. That's true success. Not the money, not the fame, but the courage to be who you are, even when the whole world says you should be someone else. Daniel's story shows us something fundamental. The power to choose who we become, even when the world tells us who we should be. And if you're living your own journey of transformation now, know that you're not alone. Maybe you identify with Daniel. Maybe you know someone who's going through this. Or maybe you're that person who needs to hear today that your rejection doesn't define your worth. If this story resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who needs this message. Because sometimes, knowing that others survived and thrived despite everything is exactly what we need to take the next step. And if you want to continue exploring stories of human transformation, tales of people who discovered strength in their most vulnerable moments, this channel shares these journeys every week. Stories of pain transformed into purpose, of rejection reborn as resilience. The next story is about a woman who transformed her best friend's betrayal into a surprising discovery about herself. A journey that might change how you see your own challenges. But for now, remember the lesson that took Daniel years to learn. You are not defined by how others see you. You are defined by who you choose to be when you're completely alone, when no one is applauding, when you only have yourself. And that choice, it's always in your hands.